The Police Federation has warned Rachel Reeves that policing is broken and it faces significant cuts due to funding shortfalls.
Well, this comes ahead of the Chancellor's spending review this Wednesday, in which she is expected to increase real-term spending for the police and force cuts to other areas within the Home Office.
Now, it's also unclear if the increase will match the more than £1 billion extra that officers say is needed to cover existing shortfalls.
Well, let's talk to former political advisor Oscar Redrop. It's going to be a big event in Parliament on Wednesday, isn't it, this spending review? It's not a budget, we should emphasise.
It's not a budget.
But nevertheless, significant cuts and possible tax rises have been trailed. What do you expect to see on Wednesday?
I mean, it's huge. It's when you think about, and this is something the Labour government tried to move away from, but there were tax increases. There was a huge tax on jobs, tax on businesses, and in many ways, months and months later, this is where we're going to see the government priorities in terms of where that money raised is going to go.
Government priorities, public priorities. People want money in prisons. People want money in the police.
Yeah.
Are they services or forces? That's the question. I think most of them are services now. But, why will they never get it through their thick heads that it isn't a problem for people to pay for security?
Well, that's, I think, what they're slightly gambling on tomorrow, on Wednesday, ahead of this spending review. You're right, actually, in terms of people's priorities. And I think things like defence, security and policing is absolutely at the top of that list. And I think that's why it's being trailed, that they'll get that above inflation spending.
So how are they going to get it, though, Oscar, isn't it?
Well, it's devil in the detail. I mean, as we've seen with the government time and time again, a lot of these things don't always come to fruition. She's been under a lot of pressure. Like, what I think viewers should know about the background of politics with decisions like this is there'll be brutal battles with departments who are all going in, all those personalities, your Angela Rayner's, for example, your Yvette Cooper's at the Home Office, they will be going into rooms with number 11 and Rachel Reeves begging for money. And so in some ways, this will be quite interesting to see the power dynamics, because I think you can almost read into, Ed Miliband, all his kind of mad energy policies. Are they going to get cuts? Are they going to get any funding?
And the government's in a much weaker position than it was last October because, OK, they didn't have the best start to governing post the election, but nevertheless, at that point, Reeves did still have this reputation as someone who was interested in fiscal prudence, this argument about closing the black hole. But since then, the black hole has opened up thanks to that spending. There have obviously been talks of rebellions. Those ministers are going to be able to fight a lot harder now, knowing that the government is on more shaky ground.
100%. And in terms of credibility there, she's already said, I mean, she's had to amend her fiscal rules to provide all this spending. But to Eamonn's point, which I think is something that politicians do miss a little bit, there is a sense of growing lawlessness in the country. And it's not just in the cities. I think how people perceive crime is important, and people in smaller towns and villages even, they're often dismissed because there might not be as much knife crime or violent crime, but how you perceive crime is very important. And sometimes the smaller stuff, which in this country sometimes feels like people have, there are no punishment. There is not enough police to stop these things. I think we saw even on trains, Rob Jenrick's video, Tom Harwood yesterday scrubbing graffiti off the trains. Smaller, lower-level crime like that.
Phone snatching.
It's just free gimmies for people.
How far are we away from what's going on in LA at the moment? Could we see a situation whereby we're sending in police or troops to snatch illegal migrants?
Well, I think, and ahead of this, just to link it back, ahead of this spending review and potential more money announced for the police force, there are people in the police who are saying it's not administrative cuts we're at now. It's like we don't have the money and the people in order to... We probably couldn't do what Trump's doing in America. Because we don't actually have the capacity to do that without more additional spending.
But the Chancellor, the government, are operating within very, very tight boundaries, aren't they? On the one hand, you've got the fiscal rules that Rachel Reeves has set herself, so she can't do anything that would see borrowing increase within 5 years. That's the OBR rules that she's chosen to follow. They've got backbenchers making very clear that they're not going to vote for welfare cuts, even the reversal of the winter fuel allowance, which, whatever you think about it, was a relatively small cut in the grand scheme of things. They've not been able to hold on to that. And then you've got the fact that, we have a 100% debt to GDP ratio. year we're shelling out £100 billion a year on debt interest alone. She's got no room for manoeuvre, has she?
She has, Miriam. A blind man and a galloping horse can see. We're going to talk later today about a pride parade funded by local councils.
But the problem is
got money to pay
you're
for that.
Right, but people, and these make headlines. But, you know, this is £35,000, the parade we're going to be talking about. The debt interest alone is £100 billion. You know, this is a total...
Listen,
I agree with cutting all that stuff, but it won't make a difference.
If you put me in charge, you put in and say, cut.
Yeah.
You just need somebody to have a bit of gumption to come in and say, we don't need that, we don't need that, we don't need that.
I just think people totally overestimate the total impact of banning those things.
This is really interesting because actually the conversation you've just had is a conversation that Reform, I think, kind of insert themselves into quite well. It's what they're doing at local council level. It's a big part, I think, of, and we'll see more and more of it as Reform try and get more serious on policy. But they want to identify all the waste, and yeah, it might be 35 grand here and 100 grand over there, but en masse together. Actually, there are a lot of savings we can find. However, for the time being, that is kind of fantasy football land. Really, it could be tax rises, is how this Labour government, we don't have a Reform government, the Tories, as you and me both know, are pretty pushed to the side at the moment. Ultimately, you feel like if we're actually going to get the departments what all departments believe they truly need, she's not going to be able to welfare cut.
They've boxed themselves into a corner because they've said they won't increase the big taxes, which would actually be the fairest and most simplest way to do it, put a penny on income tax. I'm not arguing for that. I'm just saying that's the easiest and fairest way to raise revenue. But because they've said they won't do that, they're now going to have to look for taxes in the margins that rich people can avoid because they have good accountants. The super rich will leave the country and it won't raise any money.
Yeah, and actually, and again, I think it's really slept on and people forget about it, and there isn't enough outrage about it, but that business tax, that jobs tax, that national insurance rise is crippling.
Yeah.
But you see,
and we haven't seen the effects of it fully
I think
yet.
politicians see things in one way. Let's raise tax. Let's not raise tax.
I know, I'm not advocating for that. I'm saying if we do have to raise tax, if that's the agreement...
We should be saying we don't raise tax. How much more tax can the people of this country, the ordinary working people of this country, actually afford?
But,
direct tax, indirect tax.
But if governments have to raise tax, is it better to do it in a sneaky way? To try, like, for example, freezing tax thresholds.
Yeah.
That cost ordinary families thousands of pounds over the last few years. Totally sneaky. People don't think the headline raises has gone up. Or say, do you know what? We're going to put a penny on income tax. It actually only makes about £35 a difference.
We're going to cut
£6 billion
We're going to cut this parade and that parade and all these things.
But when you've got a locked-in ageing population where NHS spend and pensions are going to go up year on year on year, whatever we do about it, there is just not this room for
Well, here's the hard thing about the National Health Service.
We're supposed to be asking him.
The National Health Service does too much for too many people, right?
Yeah.
I
if you have an
agree.
ingrown toenail, that's your responsibility. It's not the health service's responsibility. I walked into the chemist not so long ago. I wish I could remember what this was called, but anyway, I was buying some aspirin, and they said to me, do you want to get this on your... There was a term for it. Wait a minute.
Get it prescribed.
Your low income, whatever. I don't know what the heck it was called. I said, no, do not. Oh, you're entitled to that.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous.
Which is madness.
There's no responsibility from anybody. Everything's free, free.
That's what the Labour government are now finding out. In opposition, it was, why the Tories aren't spending on this? We need more money here, we need more money there. And on Wednesday, Rachel Reeves is going to get a real taste of what the burden of leadership and those choices are. Because not everyone can have everything.
No, absolutely.
No. Right, Oscar, you going to come back after 7?
I am. A bit scared after that. I might run home now, but I'll be back.